The Arizona sun was unforgiving, but the real danger came from the wreck ahead and the life slipping away inside. The call came in at 2:37 p.m. Rollover on I-10, driver trapped, smoke visible. Traffic was already backing up when the Phoenix Fire Department EMS unit arrived. Ahead, an overturned sedan shimmered in the heat haze, small flames flickering near the crumpled hood. Without hesitation, the lead paramedic grabbed his trauma bag and ran. In moments like this, there's no room for doubt, only action. If you believe stories of courage should be told, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because what happened next would test everything this paramedic had learned about saving lives under impossible conditions. The radio crackled to life as paramedic Jake Martinez adjusted his rearview mirror against the blazing Arizona afternoon sun. He had been with Phoenix Fire Department EMS for 8 years, and the desert heat never got easier to handle. His partner, rookie paramedic Sarah Chen, was reviewing protocols on her tablet when dispatch broke through the static. Unit 47, respond to I-10 eastbound, mile marker 143. Single vehicle rollover, driver trapped, smoke visible. PD on scene establishing traffic control. Jake's hands moved instinctively to the siren controls as Sarah grabbed the radio. Dispatch, Unit 47 responding, ETA 4 minutes. The familiar surge of adrenaline kicked in as Jake navigated through the afternoon traffic, the ambulance cutting through lanes with practiced precision. Through his windshield, he could already see the dark column of smoke rising from the highway ahead. Sarah, grab the trauma bag and cervical collars when we arrive. If there's smoke, we might not have long before fire spreads, Jake said, his voice steady despite the growing knot in his stomach. The heat radiating through the windshield was already intense, and they weren't even at the scene yet. As they approached the accident site, Jake could see the police cruisers with flashing lights had created a barrier, redirecting traffic into a single lane. Behind the blockade, a silver sedan lay on its side, like a wounded animal, steam and smoke rising from its crumpled hood. The mountains in the distance stood silent against the pale blue sky, witnesses to another tragedy unfolding on the unforgiving asphalt of Interstate 10. The ambulance came to a stop behind the police perimeter, and Jake was already moving before the engine shut off. He grabbed his red trauma bag while Sarah secured the yellow defibrillator case. The heat hit them like a physical wall as they stepped onto the scorching pavement. Stay behind me until we assess the scene, Jake instructed, his years of experience taking over. If those flames spread, we need to be ready to move fast. The asphalt beneath Jake's black tactical boots felt like it could melt rubber as he sprinted toward the overturned sedan. The afternoon sun reflected mercilessly off the twisted metal, creating a shimmering heat mirage that made the wreck look almost surreal. His dark navy EMS uniform shirt, adorned with the Phoenix Fire Department patches, was already damp with sweat despite the brief sprint. Sarah followed close behind, carrying the yellow defibrillator case and additional trauma supplies. The acrid smell of burning oil and hot metal filled the air, mixing with the desert dust kicked up by the accident. In the distance, Jake could hear the wail of approaching fire engines, but they were still minutes away. "Sir, can you hear me?" Jake called out as he approached the driver's side of the overturned vehicle. The sedan had rolled and come to rest on its passenger side, with the driver's window facing skyward. Small flames danced along the engine compartment, fed by leaking fluids that pooled beneath the wreck. A weak voice responded from inside the twisted metal. "Help! I can't move my legs." The man's voice was strained but conscious, which gave Jake hope. He could see a figure inside the car, a man in his 30s wearing a blue work shirt, trapped in the driver's seat that was now positioned sideways. Jake set down his trauma bag and pulled on his blue protective gloves with practiced efficiency. "My name is Jake. I'm a paramedic with Phoenix Fire. You're going to be okay, but I need you to stay very still for me. Can you tell me your name? David. David Hoffman. My legs are pinned and something's burning. The panic in David's voice was rising as the smell of smoke grew stronger. Jake positioned himself to get a better view through the shattered driver's window. The dashboard had been compressed during the rollover, trapping David's legs beneath twisted metal and plastic, but he was conscious, alert, and breathing on his own, all positive signs. Sarah, get the cervical collar ready, Jake called to his partner. David, I'm going to check you for injuries, but first I need to secure your neck. Have you lost consciousness at any point? The full scope of the accident became clear as Jake climbed onto the side of the overturned sedan to get a better angle. The vehicle had rolled at least twice, judging by the damage pattern. The roof was partially crushed, the windows were spiderwebbed with cracks, and fluids were leaking from multiple points underneath the car. Most concerning were the small flames that continued to lick at the engine compartment, growing slightly larger with each passing minute. David, I can see you're trapped, but you're breathing well and you're talking to me clearly. That's very good, Jake said, maintaining eye contact through the broken window. I'm going to reach in and check your pulse. Then we're going to put a collar around your neck to keep you safe while we get you out. David nodded slightly, his face pale but determined. The car started smoking right after it stopped rolling. I tried to get out, but I can't feel my legs. Are they... Let's focus on one thing at a time, Jake interrupted gently. Can you wiggle your toes for me? He watched as David concentrated, and to both their relief, there was slight movement visible in his work boots. Good, that's very good. Your legs are pinned, but I can see movement. We're going to get you out of here. Jake reached through the window opening and placed 2 fingers on David's carotid artery. The pulse was strong and regular, around 90 beats per minute, elevated due to stress and possible shock, but within acceptable range. David's breathing was also steady, though slightly rapid. Sarah, pass me the yellow collar, Jake called down to his partner. She handed up the cervical collar, and Jake began the delicate process of fitting it around David's neck while he remained trapped in the sideways position. This might feel a little tight, but it's going to protect your neck and spine, Jake explained as he carefully positioned the collar. I need you to keep your head still while I secure this. As he worked, Jake could hear the approaching sirens growing louder. The fire department would arrive soon with the heavy rescue equipment needed to cut David free, but those flames were still growing. Time was becoming a critical factor. How long have I been here? David asked, his voice slightly muffled by the collar. The call came in about 10 minutes ago, Jake replied, finishing the collar adjustment. You're doing great, David. Help is almost here. With the cervical collar secured, Jake was able to establish a more complete assessment of David's condition. He positioned himself to maintain constant eye contact through the broken window, understanding that the psychological connection was just as important as the medical intervention in a situation like this. David, I'm going to ask you some questions while we wait for the fire department to arrive with cutting tools, Jake said, pulling a small flashlight from his uniform pocket. Look at this light for me. He checked David's pupils, which were equal and reactive, another positive sign that there was no serious head trauma. David's responses were clear and oriented, and despite his fear, he was cooperating fully with the assessment. Can you tell me what day it is? Jake asked. Thursday, July 18th, David replied correctly. I was driving home from a job site in Tempe. A tire blew out, and I lost control. Jake nodded, making mental notes of David's orientation and the mechanism of injury. A tire blowout at highway speed could explain the violent rollover. Any pain other than your legs? My chest hurts a little, and my left shoulder, David admitted. But my legs, I really can't feel them much now. That could be from the position you're in and the pressure from the wreckage, Jake explained, though privately he was concerned about possible spinal involvement. "We're going to get you out very carefully." The sound of the fire trucks was now very close, their air horns echoing off the surrounding desert landscape. But the flames at the front of the car were also becoming more visible, the small orange tongues starting to merge into a more substantial fire. "Jake," Sarah called from below, "the fire's spreading toward the passenger compartment." Jake felt his pulse quicken, but kept his voice calm for David's benefit. "The fire department will be here in less than a minute. They'll put out those flames and cut you free. I'm not going anywhere, David. I'm staying right here with you." David's eyes showed both fear and gratitude. "Thank you. I have a wife, 2 kids. I was supposed to coach my son's baseball game tonight." "You're going to make it to many more baseball games," Jake assured him, and he meant it. Despite the growing flames and the complex extrication that lay ahead, David was stable, conscious, and responding well. They just needed to get him out before the fire reached the passenger compartment. The Phoenix Fire Department heavy rescue truck arrived with a thunderous rumble of diesel engines and hydraulic systems. Jake felt a wave of relief as he saw Captain Rodriguez step down from the cab, followed by a crew of firefighters carrying cutting tools and fire suppression equipment. "Jake, what's the situation?" Captain Rodriguez called out as his team began deploying their equipment. "Conscious male, early 30s, trapped by dashboard compression of both legs," Jake shouted back without taking his eyes off David. "Cervical collar in place, vitals stable, but we've got fire spreading from the engine compartment. I need about 10 minutes for a safe extrication." "Copy that. We're going to knock down this fire first, then get the jaws ready," Rodriguez replied. 2 firefighters immediately began attacking the flames with foam suppressant, while others prepared the hydraulic cutting tools. Jake turned his attention back to David, who was watching the activity with a mixture of hope and terror. "See that? The cavalry has arrived. These guys are the best in the business." "Will it hurt when they cut me out?" David asked. "They're going to cut the car, not you," Jake explained with a reassuring smile. "The tools are loud, but precise. I'll be right here talking you through every step." The firefighters made quick work of the flames, but Jake could see that the heat had already begun to compromise some of the vehicle's structural integrity. The plastic dashboard components had started to warp, which might actually make the extrication more complicated. "Sarah, get me a 16-gauge IV and some normal saline," Jake called down. "David, I'm going to start an IV line in your arm. It's just a precaution, but it'll help us give you fluids or medication if needed." As Jake prepared the IV, he noticed that David's pulse had increased slightly, and his skin was becoming more pale. The stress of the situation, combined with possible internal injuries and the heat, was starting to take its toll. "Talk to me about your family," Jake said as he inserted the IV catheter. "What's your son's name?" "Michael. He's 8. Plays second base," David replied, wincing slightly at the needle stick but staying focused on the conversation. "My daughter Emma is 5. She always wants to come to his games." "Sounds like a great family. They're going to be so proud of how brave you're being right now," Jake said, securing the IV line and hanging the saline bag. The simple act of establishing the IV gave him multiple options for treatment if David's condition changed during the extrication. The hydraulic jaws of life roared to life with a sound like a mechanical dragon, and Jake felt David tense beneath the cervical collar. Despite the fire department's quick action, small flames had reignited along the undercarriage of the vehicle, fed by transmission fluid that continued to leak from the damaged car. "It's loud, but that sound means freedom," Jake said loudly, speaking directly into David's ear so he could be heard over the cutting tools. "They're going to cut through the door frame first, then work on the dashboard that has your legs pinned." The firefighters worked with practiced precision, but Jake could see sweat streaming down their faces as they operated in the intense Arizona heat, combined with the radiant heat from the vehicle. The temperature around the wreck had to be approaching 120 degrees. "Jake, we're getting some concerning readings on the fuel tank," Captain Rodriguez called out during a brief pause in cutting. "The heat's building up back there. We need to speed this up." Jake felt his stomach drop, but he kept his expression neutral as he looked down at David. "Everything's going according to plan. How are you feeling? Any changes in pain level?" "I'm starting to feel nauseous," David admitted, "and I'm really hot." Those were signs that Jake had been watching for. David's body was beginning to respond to the stress, heat, and possible internal injuries. The nausea could indicate a drop in blood pressure or the onset of shock. "Sarah, get me the BP cuff," Jake called down. He quickly wrapped the blood pressure cuff around David's arm and pumped it up. The reading came back at 95/60, lower than normal, confirming that David was beginning to show signs of shock. "David, I'm going to give you some IV fluids to help with your blood pressure," Jake explained as he opened the saline drip wider. "Your body is working hard right now, and this will help support you." The cutting continued, with sparks flying as the hydraulic shears bit through the reinforced doorframe. But with each minute that passed, Jake could see the flames growing more aggressive along the rear of the vehicle. The fuel tank was heating up, and while modern cars had multiple safety systems, there was always the risk of a more serious fire or even an explosion. If this story has you hooked so far, subscribe, leave a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in his place, because what comes next would test every ounce of Jake's training and courage. The doorframe gave way with a metallic shriek, and immediately Jake had better access to David's upper body, but the dashboard compression remained, and worse, he could now see that David's left leg was bent at an unnatural angle beneath the twisted metal. The injury was more serious than he had initially hoped. "David, the good news is we can get to you much better now," Jake said, climbing partially into the vehicle through the enlarged opening. "The challenging news is that your left leg has a fracture. But people recover from broken bones every day, and you're going to be one of them." Captain Rodriguez appeared at the opening. "Jake, we've got maybe 5 minutes before this gets really dangerous. The fuel tank temperature is climbing fast." Jake nodded grimly and began a rapid trauma assessment now that he had better access. David's blood pressure was holding steady with the IV fluids, but his pulse had increased to 110. They needed to get him out, and they needed to do it now. "Sarah, get the backboard ready and call for a second unit to stand by," Jake called out. "We're going to have to move fast once he's free." The firefighters repositioned the jaws to attack the dashboard compression. This was the most delicate part of the operation. They had to cut away the metal trapping David's legs without causing further injury. Jake positioned himself to monitor David's condition and watch for any signs of additional trauma as the cutting progressed. "My leg really hurts now," David said, his voice tight with pain. "That's actually a good sign," Jake replied. "It means you're getting feeling back as we relieve the pressure. I'm going to give you something for the pain." Jake drew up a small dose of morphine and administered it through the IV line. He had to balance pain relief with keeping David alert and responsive for the extraction. "Tell me about Emma," Jake said, trying to keep David focused on positive thoughts. "What's her favorite thing to do?" "She loves to paint," David replied, his voice slightly relaxed as the morphine took effect. "Our kitchen table is covered with her artwork. Horses, rainbows, pictures of our family." "Edie." The cutting tools stopped suddenly, and Captain Rodriguez looked up with concern. "We've got a problem. The dashboard is more compressed than we thought. We need to make 2 cuts instead of 1, and I don't know if we have time." Jake felt David's hand grab his arm. "Am I going to die in here?" Looking into David's eyes, Jake made a decision that would define the rest of the rescue. "No, David, you are not going to die in here," Jake said with absolute conviction. "Rodriguez, make your cuts." "I'm staying with him no matter what." Jake repositioned himself to shield David from the sparks and debris as the firefighters made the first cut into the dashboard compression. The metal was thicker than expected, hardened by the impact and heat, making each cut a battle against time and physics. "Jake, the fuel tank pressure is redlining," one of the firefighters called out. "We need to be ready to evacuate the area." "Not without David," Jake replied firmly. He could feel David's grip tighten on his arm as the patient realized the gravity of the situation. "I don't want my kids to grow up without their dad," David whispered. "They won't have to," Jake assured him. "Focus on my voice. Tell me what you're going to say to Michael about being brave when you see him tonight." As David began to speak about his son, Jake signaled to Captain Rodriguez. They made eye contact, and Rodriguez nodded understanding. They were going to finish this, regardless of the risk. The first cut completed, and they could see David's left leg more clearly. It was definitely fractured, but the femoral artery appeared intact. No major bleeding. The second cut began, targeting the final piece of metal that held David trapped. "Almost there, David," Jake said, his own voice steady despite the sweat that poured down his face. 30 more seconds." The heat was becoming almost unbearable. Jake could see that the firefighters were rotating frequently to avoid heat exhaustion, but he stayed in position next to David, using his body to shield the patient from the worst of the radiant heat. The final cut broke through with a loud crack, and suddenly David's legs were free. But as they pulled away the metal debris, David cried out in pain as his fractured leg moved. "I've got you," Jake said, immediately supporting the injured leg. "Sarah, backboard and traction splint now." The team moved with synchronized precision. Within 90 seconds, they had David secured to a backboard with his leg stabilized. As they lifted him from the wreck, Jake caught a glimpse of flames beginning to spread more aggressively toward the rear of the vehicle. They had made it out with maybe 2 minutes to spare. The moment David was clear of the wreckage, the entire rescue team shifted into high gear. Jake maintained control of David's head and neck, while Sarah managed the IV and monitored vital signs. The firefighters continued their work on the vehicle, but now they could use more aggressive suppression techniques without risking the patient. "David, you're out, you're safe," Jake announced as they carried the backboard toward the waiting ambulance. "Look up, see that blue sky? You're breathing free air again." David's eyes filled with tears as the reality of his rescue hit him. "Thank you. Thank you so much." As they loaded him into the ambulance, Jake performed a rapid secondary assessment. The leg fracture was definitely present, but David's circulation was good, his vital signs were stabilizing, and there were no signs of internal bleeding. The cervical collar remained in place as a precaution, but David had maintained full sensation and movement in his arms and hands throughout the rescue. "Sarah, call ahead to Banner Desert Medical Center. Male, mid-30s, single vehicle rollover with probable left femur fracture. Vitals stable, IV established, ETA 12 minutes, Jake instructed as he started a more complete trauma assessment. "Copy that," Sarah replied, already reaching for the radio. Jake looked back toward the wreck as the ambulance began to move. The firefighters had gained full control of the fire, but he could see scorch marks on the ground where flames had spread during the final moments of the extraction. If they had been 2 minutes later... "Jake," David said weakly, "will you call my wife? Tell her I'm okay." "The hospital will contact your family as soon as we arrive," Jake assured him. "But yes, I'll make sure she knows you're safe. What's her name?" Lisa Hoffman. She works at the elementary school in Chandler." Jake smiled. "A teacher and a baseball coach. Your kids hit the parent lottery." As they raced toward the hospital, Jake monitored David's condition closely. The morphine was providing good pain control, the IV fluids had stabilized his blood pressure, and his mental status remained clear and oriented. The fracture would require surgery, but David was going to make a full recovery. "Will I be able to coach baseball again?" David asked as they neared the hospital. "With proper treatment and physical therapy, there's no reason you shouldn't be back on that field," Jake replied. "Might take a few months, but you'll be there for the championship game." The emergency department at Banner Desert Medical Center received David with the smooth efficiency that Jake had come to expect from the trauma team. As they transferred care to the emergency physician, Jake provided a thorough report of the accident, the extrication, and David's condition throughout the rescue. "Excellent work getting him out of there," Dr. Martinez told Jake as they wheeled David toward the trauma bay. "The orthopedic surgeon will take a look at that leg, but his vitals look great and his neurological status is intact." Jake watched as David disappeared into the treatment area, still conscious and still talking with the medical staff. In a few hours, he would be in surgery having his leg repaired. In a few weeks, he would be home with his family. In a few months, he would indeed be back on the baseball field with Michael. As Jake and Sarah restocked their ambulance for the next call, Captain Rodriguez approached with a grin. "Hell of a job in there, Jake. That was textbook extrication under pressure." "Team effort," Jake replied, though he felt a deep satisfaction at the successful outcome. "How bad did the car get after we pulled him out?" "Total loss. The fuel tank ruptured about 3 minutes after you got him clear. If we'd waited any longer..." Rodriguez shook his head. "But we didn't wait. We got him out." As they prepared to return to service, Jake's radio crackled with an incoming call. "Unit 47, respond to Camelback Road and 32nd Street. Chest pain, priority 2. "Unit 47 responding," Sarah replied, and they were back on the road. But as they drove through the desert afternoon, Jake found himself thinking about David Hoffman. In a few hours, Lisa would be at his bedside, probably crying with relief. Michael and Emma would get to hug their father again. A family would remain whole because of the work they had done on a scorching stretch of Interstate 10. This was why Jake had become a paramedic 8 years ago. Not for the adrenaline or the excitement, but for moments like this, when training, courage, and teamwork came together to pull someone back from the edge, when the difference between life and death came down to seconds, and those seconds stretched just long enough for a rescue. The road behind them shimmered in the heat haze, but ahead lay whatever the next call would bring. Jake adjusted his rearview mirror against the Arizona sun and drove toward the future, knowing that somewhere in Phoenix, a little girl was probably already working on a painting of her hero daddy who came home safe. If this story moved you, subscribe, turn on the bell, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because out there on the highways and in the cities, there are always more lives to save, more heroes answering the call, and more families counting on the courage of those who stand between life and death.